here and get ready. This is the Noise Pollution Podcast.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Noise Pollution Podcast. We're celebrating a very, very special episode today. This is episode 50, guys. 50. I know it's not 100 yet, but I like to celebrate the mini milestones everywhere in between. 25, 50, 62, I don't care, whatever it is. But I got a very familiar guest with you guys that you guys have heard before on the podcast. Kris Kelley, owner of the Rustic Cup.
Hey, glad to be back.
Yeah, flashback to episode 8 when I had no idea what I was doing here. We interviewed Kris. So what's up, man? How's it going?
Hey, pretty good. Pretty good. We're staying busy.
Yeah.
I'm staying busy. Still living underneath this rock I call Rustic Cup.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's been almost a year since we were out here when we did our original episode together. And which means that I guess it's been another year since you've been open for, right? So it's what, your third year now?
Yeah, mid-September will be 3.
That's crazy, man.
I know.
How's that feel?
Surreal. Like it honestly feels like it's only been months. Like it's all going by so quickly.
Right, right. And I mean, obviously you've done well, you know, since last year. I mean, you're still open for one. That's big.
I've survived. Yeah.
So yeah. Hey, it's all about the perspective, man. So, well, awesome, man. Well, I'm glad that you're here celebrating episode 50 with me, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you bringing me back on.
Yeah. Well, I just had a delicious, what was it? A mocha?
Yeah, nice mocha.
Oh, so good. I already had morning coffee, but now I had that. I'm like wired up now. And coffee doesn't really give me the jitters, man. It doesn't, but it really, that was good, man.
Good.
Delicious.
Good.
So good. It's so freaking hot out, man. Like, that was perfect. I'm not the biggest fan of iced coffee, but that was just, hit the spot. Appreciate it.
Good.
You're good at what you do, man. You're good at it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So episode 50, guys, I just want to take a moment real quick to thank all of you so much for your dedicated and continued support of the Noise Pollution Podcast and the guests that come on. Yeah, so Kris and I had a conversation previously about getting together for another episode, you know, sometime in the near future. And something that we kind of have conversations about here and there, you know, but like, you know, Kris and I we're kind of on the same page with a lot of things and how we view the world and stuff like that. And, but today we're going to talk about coffee and conspiracy theories. Dun, dun, dun. So now, like I said, back a couple episodes ago, I said this is not a conspiracy theory based podcast. However, nothing is off limits, as you guys have known. It's episode 50, guys. If you're just tuning in now, if this is your very first episode, first of all, I want to say welcome to episode 50. And maybe you should go back and listen to the previous 49 and then catch up. That's a lot of catching up to do, so we can wait. It's all there for you. But a lot's changed since episode 1 and to where we are today. So, but yeah, Kris, I get asked this question a lot by a lot of people, and I really don't know how to respond to it because I have no idea how. A lot of people ask me, Blake, what's your favorite conspiracy theory? I want to pawn this question off to you. Do you have a favorite? I think it's such a broad question.
I mean, I don't even know. I wouldn't know how to answer that either. I mean, off the top of my head, I would say that some of my favorites are, and I can't think of any specifically, but something that was considered a conspiracy theory at one point in time and then was later proven to be true. Because that just kind of sheds some light that like, there's something to be looked at. Like if enough people get a vibe that something's off, something's not right, or there's something going on underneath the surface, I think it should be investigated until it's pretty well cleared up that no, there's nothing going on. This is what it is. Just let it go. But,
right.
There's plenty of examples out there. And like I said, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Maybe Golf at Tatonkin might have been one that was considered a conspiracy theory at one point in time and then was proven to be true. So those sorts of things just lend some credibility to the conspiracy theory sort of mindset that like, don't just take for face value what you're being spoon-fed. And honestly, I mean, I kind of don't even like the term conspiracy theory because it's just kind of thrown around like this derogatory term.
Exactly. Yeah. It's you can't use that word without putting an automatic assumption to, oh, this person just wears tinfoil and he hides in his bunker in his basement all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think like to preface what you're saying, like one that was proven to be true is Operation Northwoods. I don't know if you ever heard of that one.
Maybe.
Similar to like something like the Gulf of Tonkin, right? So where the Gulf of Tonkin was a deliberate act to get support to start the war in Vietnam, right? They attacked ships.
Mm-hmm.
What bay was that? Where was that? I can't remember where it was, but the Operation Northwoods was it's declassified now. It's an operation to actually stage false attacks on American citizens to invade Cuba. That actually happened. It didn't happen, but that plan was put into place. It was never executed, but something like that, like that was later on proven, like, no, this is not a conspiracy theory anymore. This actually was a thing.
Yeah.
And it happened.
False flags.
Yeah.
They're a thing.
They really are. They really are a thing. But like I said, people ask me all the time, what's your favorite conspiracy theory? Like, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist guy. I do talk about them because they're fun. I think they're super interesting. And I think it's important for us to be able to open our mind to the possibility that sometimes I think there's a little bit more going on behind closed doors than what we tend to realize and what we know.
For sure.
But yeah, so a lot of people, they ask me like 9/11, stuff like that. What do you think about 9/11? I mean, look, you guys know I was in the military, and like the most of us around my age, they went into the military was because of what happened on 9/11. Now we were all pretty young and we just saw what happened on the TV and stuff like that. But as you grow older and you start to, and you have to thank social media as well for bringing such light to a lot of things. It's helped us as ordinary, you would call ordinary people, to grasp and get a hold of so much more information. But just to broaden the mind. Now, do I think it was an inside job? I don't know. Not necessarily. I don't know if I can buy it. But I will say that there is a conference held every year with hundreds, maybe even the thousands at this point, with structural engineers that have come out and said, like, this is not possible. Like, this is not, a plane could not have done that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I've definitely come across those groups that are trying to weed through all the quote unquote official documents that came out with the official story and just kind of shed some expert opinion or expert eyes or whatever on those particular things. And I mean, like you said, I mean, I'm not really a conspiracy theories guy, but I like to be a critical thinker. So I mean, if somebody has credentials to be stating, whether or not jet fuel can melt steel beams or whatever the case may be, like, I'm going to listen to that person over somebody that is just in some sort of elected committee that was just assigned to investigate this. Like, they don't have the background, they don't have the scientific knowledge or the education to really know one way or the other. So yeah, I mean, I've come across that stuff too, and it's compelling evidence that there was something else going on. But that's about as far as I'm willing to say. I mean, I really don't know anymore. I'm not an expert. I don't know if jet fuel can melt steel beams.
Right.
I've come across some really compelling evidence that there's definitely something else going on there.
Sure. Well, like, to go back on what you said real quick about like people who have like a profound education, like a structural engineer, talking about 9/11 stuff like that. And then you go to like the flat earth people. I have to ask you, are you a flat earther, Chris?
I'm not. I'm not a flat earther.
Because people ask me that all the damn time. Like, oh, you're a conspiracy guy? No, I'm not. Oh, you believe in flat earth, don't you? Like, no, I don't. I don't believe in flat earth. But, but I have to, I did an episode about that. I talked about it. And one of my big things on that was that if you took, say, the top person of the Flat Earth Society, so whoever runs the Flat Earth Society Twitter page, and you took them up in a rocket ship and then you took them into space to view the world as its current condition of what it is, they would still be in denial. You know what I mean?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, just because at that point it's more of like an ego-driven thing. Like, they've invested so much time and
it's almost a religion.
Yeah, exactly. It's a brainwashed religion. Yeah, it's like Scientology or whatever else. Like, we've been lied to.
Yeah.
This massive lie. Everyone's conspired to say that the Earth's actually round when it's really not.
But I mean, to be honest, like, I think you can't have a flat Earth society if you don't have a system that produces lies all the time. I mean, like, we keep coming across these conspiracy theories that they're like, no, that's not what's going on. And then they're proven to be true. And then, like, I mean, you get people starting to question everything. And I mean, it's good to question everything, but unfortunately you're getting the same people that went through the same structured school system created by these people that are lying to us, questioning everything now with no critical thinking abilities. So, I mean, you end up with this. I think we've bred a flat earth society in our society.
Right. And that whole flat earth thing, that goes back hundreds of years. You know what I mean? Well, I mean, God, it goes back as far as we know, because they used to think the earth was flat. You know what I mean? That you couldn't go to the edge because you'll just fall off. Before we knew any better, before we actually mapped the world for what it is and stuff like that. But I think that's a really, really good point to bring up. And the, saying that, like, coming from, like, a basis of, like, we're not really quite trustworthy of our three-letter agencies and stuff like that, because there is a lot of secrecy and things that do go on, and it does raise a lot of questions when things do happen. It's like, well, what's like, have you ever heard, like, the saying is, like, what's the story behind the story? You know what I mean?
For sure.
And I think that's what births conspiracies, conspiracy theories, stuff like that, and, like, how they can kind of really spiral out of control. And then, you know, then you do have the ones that do come right. They're correct and they're true. It's like, holy shit, like this actually happened.
Yeah.
And I think that happens a lot. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Can't think of anything recently, I guess, but like we talked about, like, Operation Northwoods, or I don't know if, like, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, was that, like, one of those ones that was, like, proven to be, like, that's, like, it was a real thing?
I thought so. I mean, I just pulled that out of my ass, honestly, but I kind of think so. Right.
Okay. So we kind of got that across on the table right there. You and I are not big conspiracy theory guys. We're not. Did you subscribe to Alex Jones?
No.
Okay. Are you one of those guys who, like, dismisses him completely? He's just a shill. And
no.
Okay. So what do you feel about him being censored and pulled off of, like all those major social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Apple, and Spotify?
Oy vey. That, I don't even know. That touches so many different things, because on one hand, these social media platforms are private companies, private corporations. They should be able to do whatever they want. If they want to censor people, they should be able to censor people because they're private. They're not public. So I do kind of believe in the sovereignty of private companies, but I mean, these companies aren't private strictly in a laissez-faire sort of sense. They're very wrapped up in the government and the bureaucracy. And so there's definitely some political motivations there that I don't necessarily agree with, but then we could get into whether or not corporations should even exist and whether somebody can run a company but not be accountable for the decisions that company makes. I mean, it really touches a whole bunch of topics that I don't know that episode 50 can really cover. We might have to have a couple more dozen episodes to get into it all. But I mean, I think it was kind of crappy. I think if you want to have a platform that you're giving people the opportunity to, because like you said, social media has been the gateway to a lot of people to good information and to kind of falling into some rabbit holes that maybe expanded their perception of something or their perspective of something. So I think it could be a good thing, but if you start silencing people because they don't agree with your political agenda or whatever the case may be, then you're going to stifle that potentiality for somebody to come across something that was cool, some rabbit hole that really got them thinking differently. And I mean, Alex Jonas, I think some of the things he says is absolutely crazy, but
gay frogs, man.
But so what? So let an educated critical thinker find that, come across it, research it, and find out that it's kind of crazy. Like, let people come to their own conclusions. If people are coming to the wrong conclusion, then you've got something wrong with your education system, from my perspective.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that. I just released an episode about education and stuff like that. So, not a conspiracy thing, just like an open perspective type thing. Mm-hmm. But to touch back on the Alex Jones things real quick, and he got pulled from all those things. Now, I've said it before, I feel like I have to continuously repeat myself because people try to blast me on Twitter oh, you're just you're a Alex Jones, fastest racist and stuff like that. No, people, you probably didn't even listen to the episode where I talked about that. Like, you would know if within the first 5 minutes, I'm not the biggest fan of Alex Jones. I don't really subscribe to Alex Jones. I do dabble in it because, one, it's mostly entertaining. It's wild, and it's just another way to open your mind perspectively. You know what I mean? To look at something a little bit differently. Even if it's wrong, it kind of opens that mind. But I guess for some people, and this is where like a lot of those people who argue against it, feel like they take Alex Jones, subscribe to it, and it just dives deep and far in their brain, and then they're just kind of stuck in this Alex Jones cycle where nothing else is true.
But the same thing happens to people who watch Fox News.
That's a very good point. And, they pulled him for hate speech. So, and I feel like that's like a major slippery slope that they basically, these private companies, they got together and they set a precedent for what hate speech was. And if you Google hate speech, it's the discrimination against one specific, thing. So against one individual group of people based on the color of their skin or their, sexual orientation or whatever else. That is hate speech. I can't come to find myself anything that Alex Jones was saying was actual hate speech. You know what I mean? So now you have these privately owned companies setting a precedent to what hate speech is. So what's next? That's the slippery slope I'm talking about. So,
sure.
Like even like in the UK, like you can get jail time for speaking freely. You know what I mean? The right to free speech is a constitutional right in America where it's not a right or a privilege in others. Like you can get jail, And what that, a lot of people don't understand is what that amendment means is that you can say whatever you want with, whether it's morally right or wrong, you have that right to be a racist or whatever it is, even though, I think most of us can agree that those guys are assholes and they deserve a special place in hell, but they have that right. And all that right guarantees is that you will not be thrown into prison for it. That's it. Whether it's right or wrong.
Right.
So, but yeah, so again, it's an incredibly slippery slope, and hopefully it kind of stopped there with Alex Jones, and it doesn't really move on into other sectors. But yeah.
I think it is in other sectors. I think it's just Alex Jones has become the big publicly noticed, example of it. But I think there's plenty of other people that are being censored on these social media streams that we don't know of. I'm sure of it. I mean, just as a critical thinker, if they've done this in this big public way, I can't imagine that they haven't been testing the waters of how to pull people off in other small ways. I just can't imagine that the huge conglomerates that these social media companies are would just do this as a one-off just to see how it goes. I don't think you really run businesses like that at that level.
Right. And and I said it before, I don't really have any major political views or opinions. It's like I said, if anything, I'm more of a libertarian. I kind of lean towards that side a little bit. But I for some reason I have a lot of like conservative related like things like I show up on my personal Facebook and stuff like that. Probably because of my military background and all that stuff like that. A lot of dudes in the military and what they follow are mostly conservative Republicans, stuff like that. So I see a lot of this stuff, and a lot of what I see is a lot of these conservative people, whether politicians or not, they're basically saying that they themselves are being shadow banned often, frequently. Like posts are being they're not being as distributed as equally as like common predecessors or equal people amongst whatever political side. Like one person I can think of in particular is John Burke. He started off as like he's a former Army drill sergeant. He got out of the military. He got famous with his like big famous like fat shaming rant. He got really big with that. He blew up, went viral. And from there, he was able to formulate like a fitness company and do various other things. Now he talks politics a lot, and he had his Instagram was removed. It was banned. Now he did end up getting it back. He fought it, but he wasn't notified why. And again, this goes to the whole, he wasn't told if he had like hate speech or anything like that. He just got banned. But yeah, so, and he talks a lot about like, he feels that a lot of people who are, Republican conservative, like whether or not politicians or not, they just kind of support the things that tend to come from a conservative viewpoint, like guns and just like a gritty lifestyle, stuff like that. And anti-PC culture, stuff like that. And he feels that there's a lot of shadow banning taking place amongst those type of people who have those big Instagram, Facebook, YouTube accounts, whatever it is. Like they feel that their posts are not being equally distributed to their followers. Like I'm sure you've seen it too. You're on Facebook as well, that you'll put a post up and like it seems like it gets no reaction, it gets no feedback. I've had that before. I've seen it a lot myself as well. Like one time I could post like something of the pretty much the same context, right? Like a day before, and it does really well. And then the next day, it could be the same type of thing. I could use the same hashtags, whatever it is, and you see so much less feedback from it. So I don't know how these algorithms work to like produce this kind of like showmanship, how your content would be displayed on other people's accounts who follow you. I have no idea. But so I don't know if it's like, is it a thing of shadow banning, or is there like, it's just like the social media game? I mean, who the hell knows? I think it's probably a good combination of both.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it is a combination of both. And I know, this kind of reminds me of an article I read before about how, I think it was, Apple iPods, one of the early generations of them, they were getting tons of complaints from users that their shuffle wasn't randomizing their music. They're like, I have 3,000 songs in this playlist and I've heard 3 Doors songs back to back. You know, that can't be random. And it was random. I mean, that is randomity. Like, you will get those fluke sort of things that happen. And so in order to appease the customers, so this article said, Apple went and rewrote their shuffle algorithm to make it less random, but make it feel more random. So like, I know that even though you might put something out there and you feel like it's not getting the attention that it should, that might be because of the algorithm and because of what's going on in the background. And I don't know that we have enough insight to really know how that works. And there's so many variables that go into whether or not your post is going to be shown to one of your followers, and it's just really hard to track. So I mean, I think you're exactly right, though. It's a combination of both. I think I don't know that you or I are big enough to even catch the attention of any of these corporations to really experience shadow banning personally, but I'm sure it's happening to people that are making waves and potentially causing trouble for these companies. But yeah, I think it's definitely a combination of both.
All right. So how do you feel that like this type of thing now, to go back and we just said about like it's a good combination of both shadow banning and just how the social media algorithms just tend to work. So how do you feel that like I totally lost my train of thought right there. But it's a really big like PC culture taking place and stuff like that. This whole, hate speech, anti-hate speech, PC culture seems to be like on the rise and stuff like that. Like how do you feel like we're kind of catering toward like a very specific like group of people? I don't know. I'm very un-PC. I think words are just words. I mean, there are hateful words out there, of course, but in the end, they're just words. Like there's a podcaster. I'm not going to mention who he is, but he's a very raw comedy podcast, and he roasted the hell out of me and the podcast. It was brutal, but I mean, but he messaged me, he's like, hey, look, I used you in a format for an episode. Please don't hate me. It's just comedy. I'm like, totally get it, man. Yeah. Like I have no thin skin, all good. Like, and then we kind of branched some ideas from there, but I don't know. Do you think that like a lot of these like big corporations, Facebook, YouTube, whatever else, like they kind of use this policy? Now, my take on this is that a lot of these big time companies, they're very left leaning. In my opinion, I think like out in California and stuff like that, which YouTube headquarters is in California, which is owned by Google, which has been known to do work with the CIA, the NSA, etc. So do you think that like these 3-letter agencies infiltrate these companies to push certain agendas?
I think it's kind of a two-way street. I think these companies don't get, like, we're in a crony capitalist system. So in order to become one of the biggest conglomerates within our country, you have to play the slimy game of catering to lobbyists and, putting your money in a congressman's pocket in order to get some sort of regulation written that stifles your competition so that you can grow to the size of these companies. So I think it's kind of a two-way street. They start by lobbying their congressmen and throwing money into the central government, the federal government, in order to stifle competition or depends on what their service or product is, but in order to get bigger, in order to get a grip on the market. So they utilize the government, and then the government in turn utilizes them once they grow to the size that they become useful. So I think it's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that 100%. I mean, we see that all the time in Washington, lobbying. That's why like massive companies, that was a GM that got that massive bailout from the government a couple years ago. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's what's wrong with capitalism right there. I think the government needs to stay far, far away from private business. Because you're right there. That's a really good point to bring up, is that lobbying, it creates like the anti-competition in a way. If you're able to get the government in your pocket, you won. Like
Sure.
you win. That's why the Rustic Cup will never be Starbucks.
Nope.
Because Starbucks is invested into hiring 10,000 refugees, whatever, I just pulled that out of my ass right there. But, right. But yeah, it's crazy, man. Like it's a crazy, crazy world we live in that, I think people really, really want the government to be in so much more control than what it is. Now, I'm a firm believer in like small-time government, as small as possible. Stay out of my private life, stay out of my business. You already tax the hell out of me enough as it is. But when you're using your leverage as an elected official to gain or to basically make precedence over other competition just because someone's shoving millions of dollars into your pocket, that's unfair.
It really is.
But yeah, it's just nuts, man. Now, how do you feel about that? Like, are you like, I don't know, what's your for, I guess, a quick little background? Like, do you have like a political background, like a preference or anything like that?
I was very apolitical, throughout most of my life. Well, I should say throughout most of my childhood. It wasn't until I was like maybe, probably right around voting age, 18, is when, I started being introduced to some like grassroots efforts by the York County Libertarian Party, and was kind of, I don't know, groomed, I guess, by my boss at the time, who was a great person and gave me a lot of insight into the world and a lot of insight into business. I don't think I would have this coffee shop if it weren't for his influence. But he really kind of got me onto the idea of libertarianism. I really appreciated that moral stance, I guess, that the party took, that I will fight for the rights for people to do things that I don't personally agree with. Like, I will fight for the right for somebody to use heroin if they want to use heroin. Like, if that's what they want to do and that's what they value in their life, is just a fast, hard sort of life, to hell with my longevity and my sanity and my whatever. That's them. Like that, like you said earlier, you are all about like the smallest form of government possible. And I tend to agree. I'm all about the smallest form of government possible, but I've come to the conclusion that is me. Like, I am the smallest form of government possible. Like, I govern my life. Nobody else can. Nobody else knows my subjective scale of values. They can't tell me whether I value this or that, more than the other. I can only make those decisions. So I would fight for the right for somebody to make those decisions for themselves. And that appealed to me. But I did kind of transition over the years into a much more anarcho-capitalist sort of perspective where, like I said, I think the smallest form of government is you, your own person. And that inherent property right of you owning your own body, and you're the only person that has the right to say what you can and can't do with your body. I think all other rights really should stem from that. And I think we've gotten far away from that.
Right, I agree. Now, you kind of briefly touched on it quickly. I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about anarchism?
I think anarchy is the epitome of liberty. I don't think you can be free if you have any form of oppression. So I think the problem is that, kind of like we were talking about how conspiracy theories have this negative connotation, I think anarchy has this negative connotation that like anarchy equals chaos. And I don't really think that's the case. You know, when I talk about anarchy to some people, I'll get the pushback that, well, it's just going to be the Wild West and you're just going to have, you know, whoever's able to make the most money and control all the guns is going to oppress everybody. And my question is, how is that different from what we have now? Like, we have the central government sucking resources out of society. It's all flowing up. They control the tanks, the guns, the rockets, the nukes, and they're oppressing us. Like, that's what we have. But we don't have a choice about it now. Like, at least in anarchy, there's this fluidity that can happen where you can see the shift in balance happen easier, maybe quicker, because you're not so tied to the infrastructure that's built around a central government. So yeah, there's still going to be rape and pillaging and stealing and theft and murder and all of that in an anarchist society, but we have that now. And I think government exacerbates the issue. I don't think it makes it any better.
Right. And, you know, I've talked about this before as well. Like, I understand, like, the premise behind anarchism. I do. I understand it. And like, you're right. It does have that negative connotation that it's just unruly and it's just savage and it's just, you know, just everyone for themselves type of mentality. But the base core foundation, it's not. It's exactly how you spoke right there so eloquently. But the one thing that I have trouble getting behind is, like, so in anarchism, you have self-governance. So from the smallest level possible, right? How does it work? Where, so obviously, even as someone in anarchy, there has to be leaders and there has to be elected officials, so to speak, right? And what do you do, like, if this person who is put in charge of the tribe, right? And they're batshit crazy. Like, their rule is, oh, you don't show up to work on time, you get your fingers chopped off. And that's the thing. You know what I mean? I know that's a very wild and out there, you know, perspective, but I mean, is there like a vetting process or something like that?
Sure. I mean, it's anarchy. It's whatever we come up with. I mean, without the government's assistance, we came up with cell phones and we came up with Wi-Fi and we came up with all these other technologies that we were able to create as a species, and we were able to do good. We were able to come up with the Red Cross and the United Way, and there's people out there that aren't batshit crazy, and I would hope that they wouldn't elect a batshit crazy person to lead their tribe. And if they find out that a batshit crazy person is leading their tribe, they're not held to that. They're not like, there's not that patriotism that, like, I am an American or I am a European or my country, Germany. So, like, you just leave, like, go somewhere else, follow somebody else, start your own tribe. I mean, like, it's whatever you want. But I mean, that's a very, like, I don't know, just a very small scale sort of perspective of anarchy. I mean, obviously, like, we wouldn't really have tribes nowadays. We wouldn't really have that sort of structure. Mm-hmm. People have a certain expected standard of living. And I think we could maintain that. I think we are maintaining that in spite of government. I mean, what's the government's national debt at? I mean, what is $19 trillion or something ridiculous like that? Yeah. Like, in an anarchist society, there would be no forced taxation. There would be no coercion. Well, I mean, there would be coercion, but it wouldn't be institutionalized in the way that it is. But there'd be no taxation across the country, so you wouldn't have that misdirection of resources. Like, right now, if I were putting my money into, I don't know, pick a company, you know, Acme Incorporated. If I were putting my money into that company for whatever service or product they're providing, and I don't like the way they're going about it, or I see that they're wasting money, or I see that they're spending it on something that I don't agree with, I stop. Mm-hmm. I stop giving them my money and I put my money elsewhere. And that money becomes my vote for what I agree with and what I don't agree with. You can't do that when you're taxed. I can't decide to stop my taxes because I don't agree with what my local municipality's doing, or I can't stop my federal funds because I don't agree with whatever the Department of Defense's budget is for the year. You know, like, I can't do that. I don't have that choice to vote with my dollars. So those resources are just getting sucked up into that infrastructure, and they're they're lost and they're misdirected and they're put into the stifling of competition or black budgets or whatever the case may be. So in an anarchist society, I don't know what the answer would be. We'd come up with it, just like we've come up with solutions to every other problem we've faced so far as a species, with or without government. I think in spite of government a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. So, which begs me to ask the question: this is, do you feel that like as our current state of society today, we would be okay and prepared for like an anarchist society, or do you think? I mean, obviously, with any major change, there would be a lot of rebellion. Maybe some coups or whatever else. Like, you know what I mean? Like, do you think that the state of our society is today is stable enough to handle such a drastic change?
I don't think the state of our society today is stable enough to handle democracy anymore. I think we're seeing right now the failings of our current structure. And so, I mean, I don't think there's any stability in the structure we have. I think the dollar could collapse at any moment. I think there could be World War III at any moment. We don't have control over congressional approval of wars anymore. We don't have control over drone strikes anymore. I mean, we've lost control of this system. This system is anarchy with taxation and the monopoly of force. Like, I mean, we kind of are in it. So, I mean, I don't think we have a choice. I think we are going to see coups or revolts at some point in time, and that's unfortunate. I mean, but I don't think the powers that be are going to just relinquish control. So I think if we want control of our own lives, we're going to have to take it back, unfortunately.
Right. And I felt this too, in that, I don't know, like there could be a revolution of some sort within our lifetime. I don't know. It's hard to ponder that type of question, because I don't think it would be like a revolution of what we would envision, just full out, country global chaos and war. I think it would be like we need like a revolution of the mind. You know what I mean? I think we're so divided in our country, and it's terrible. I mean, and we're always not going to see eye to eye on everything. And I think a lot of people get that. Like, that's why we have different parties and political opinions and stuff like that. We all do view the world differently, but it's the inability to actually come together to figure out here's the problem. Okay. And here's all these solutions. What meets the needs of your belief system, my belief system? Where can we meet in the middle? And that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So, you're definitely right onto something. And you see the memes all the time. It's like, taxation is theft and all of that stuff. It's almost like a joke now at this point, because you see it so often, but, and I've thought about that a lot too. It's like, without taxes, like, where does that money come from? We use the taxes to pay for the military, their budgets, or their, to pay the individual soldier, stuff like that, and all these government funded programs. Like, I don't know. Do you subscribe to Rand Paul by any chance?
I mean,
you see him here and there.
I see him here and there.
Okay.
I know I'm more familiar with his father than I am with him, but I saw he just recently backed Gary Johnson, which I think was kind of a cool thing to see, just that he kind of stepped outside of his party.
Right. So I don't know if you saw, but he did a thing on Twitter when they were reviewing the spending budget for the year. It's for the approval. He did like a live Twitter thing. I forget what they call it, but he basically tweeted out like everything he did, like, while he was reviewing the budget. He posted like, oh, so here's all these billions of dollars getting spent to all these things you have never heard about before. And he like would list it all, how much it goes to. Yeah. And that put out such an amount of massive information that you and I and everyone else, we have no clue where all that money's going to.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really, really cool thing for him to do. Just literally watching it. It's like, 11 o'clock at night, order myself a pizza, still going over this thing. And, it was really cool to see.
Yeah, I think transparency is important.
It is, and that kind of segues into the next thing is the lack of transparency. Mm-hmm. Now, I used to work for the government per se in the military, but
we all work for the government.
That's true. We all work for the government. Are you a spy? Is this a setup right now? Are you setting me up right now?
I was. That would be a cool life.
Like, I'm gonna pull this no name podcaster
spy in a coffee shop,
and I'm gonna. And I'm going to have him dump all of his information, and I'm going to assassinate him out back. No, but
if something happens to you now, I'm in hot water.
That's true. Look, I'm not that big. I'm not Alex Jones level, so I don't think I ever will be. And like I said, this is not a conspiracy-based podcast. There's plenty of them out there. Go subscribe to them if you want conspiracy theories. But it's just a fun little 50 episode special out here. But yeah, the lack of transparency within government. Now I know that there has to be some sort of level, right? Coming from that perspective, as I used to operate within the military and do operations overseas and stuff like that. You can't have like a live feed of like all of this shit. Like, obviously then it wouldn't work. So I think there has to be some sort of level of secrecy in a way, but then again, it depends on what the situation is. Now, the level of secrecy in the conducting of military operations overseas, that's one thing, but then having secrecy in revolving around the national defense or the national budget, you know what I mean, for the year.
Yeah.
And the lack of there was what I'm getting to. And the whole, taxation is theft thing really kicks into play. It's like, why the fuck are we really spending billions of dollars for this thing? I can't even bring one up because it's so preposterous. I've never even heard of it before. I'd have to, pull it up on Google right now, but, you've never heard of it before. I've never heard of it before. And it's not just one thing. It's like thousands of things. Like, why are we putting all this money into things that we don't even know exist? And then we wonder why our national debt is so high, and that number will never ever be repaid. Now, something that's not a conspiracy is the Federal Reserve. A lot of people talk about like JFK assassination and stuff like that was because he was, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but he wanted to go to a gold-backed system. Is that correct? And then
I've heard that.
Okay. And then, which is why they took him out for that reason. That's a conspiracy theory in itself alone, but the Federal Reserve alone, there's a lot of people out there that don't understand what the Federal Reserve is and what it was put in place for.
Yeah.
And what people I don't think understand is that with that type of system, we will never ever get out of debt. That's why we see inflation. Like you talked about previously about how the U.S. dollar could collapse at any time, and you're absolutely right. And I know when Trump got into office, his big thing was we're going to audit the Federal Reserve. And obviously it's been almost 2 years-ish. That hasn't happened yet. And I don't think it ever will. They control everything. They have the United States by the balls. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And that's by design.
Of course. Yeah. There's a really interesting, there's a documentary out there. It's called, Zeitgeist. Have you ever seen that? It's on, I think it's on Netflix now. There's I think 3 parts of it. The second one was okay. The third one I didn't even watch because I didn't really like the second one, but the first one was really good. I think it started off with religion and then it kind of moved into like the beginning of like the U.S. with the Federal Reserve and stuff like that. So a lot of information, and that's all true. That's not a conspiracy theory. All that stuff in there is true. So if you guys want to look into that, go to Netflix. Everyone has a Netflix account these days, and look up Zeitgeist. I know it's a really tricky word to say, but yeah, super fascinating documentary. And then there's another one on YouTube as well. It's called The Esoteric Agenda. That's a really good one too.
Well, and since we're giving these plugs, I came across a documentary called The Money Masters. Not nearly as entertaining, I guess, as Zeitgeist really was, but it's kind of dry, very informative, and it's 3 hours of nothing but the establishment of the Fed in the United States, and it goes over the senators that had assassination attempts on them because they were trying to stall the Fed from coming in, and I mean it's very informative. There's some conclusions at the end of it that don't really hold much water now, and I think it was done in the 80s or something, so it is a little dated, but the information about how the Fed was established is spot on, and there's all kinds of references and whatnot that you can check throughout that.
Okay. Something I wanted to bring up today. Have you heard of this QAnon stuff? It's so big on like Facebook and like social media and stuff like that. Yeah. QAnon. Have you heard? I don't know if it's a part of Anonymous. I'm sure you've heard of that before. Yeah. Anonymous. I don't know if it's a branch off of them for some reason, but so what QAnon is, it's basically this big Trump supporter, and he's a massive Trump supporter, but it's like a conspiracy theory, like Trump supporter, and he's putting out all this information and stuff like that. And it's gotten to a point to where like you see at Trump rallies, people hold up Q signs, like QAnon, like follow the Q, whatever else. And he actually, I have him pulled up, and the identity of him is not private by any means. He runs the Twitter. I think he calls himself Lionel. His name is Michael LeBron. That's his name. But yeah, so he actually met with Donald Trump a couple weeks ago at the White House, and now he said that nothing was spoken about in regards to the things that he talks about. And there's some wild shit that he does talk about. For instance, he quote shed some light onto a recent almost a takedown of Trump. He was apparently in flight, and they tried to use a missile to take out the plane. And I guess according to this Q person, and I'm using this source very broadly, you know, I'm probably wrong and I don't care. I'm not saying I believe it. It's just this is the stuff that he's putting out there. And that there was an attempt to take him out in his plane with like a surface to air missile or something like that. And that he has hired like Blackwater Security. And if anyone is familiar with Blackwater, private security company, massive company. And like they were this Q person, Lionel, as he calls himself. He was able to trace about that. I forget who it is, but Eric Prince is the CEO of Blackwater, that he is married to someone who is extremely close with Donald Trump. So that's why you have, hence the Blackwater Security, stuff like that. The Blackwater technically doesn't, I don't know if it exists anymore, because they had that big event back in like the early 2000s in the Iraq War.
Yeah.
With, they would say that it was unjust killing in a security event that was happening out in sector somewhere in Iraq. Not going to go deep into that right now. That's a pretty big thing as it states right now. All I can say is that those guys are still in jail. Those Blackwater guys. I've read the book. I've read Eric Prince's book. It was okay. but yeah, so to the QAnon thing, it's super interesting. And like, so Trump meets with this guy, and like Trump points to the guys in the crowd, holding the big Q sign. Like, so all of these, you know, Republicans and the conservative people out there, they see it's like, holy shit, like this shit's true. The stuff, I mean, you can go on Twitter and go to find QAnon. I'm sure he's verified, and just see the things that he talks about on there. And it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. So it's like an Alex Jones conspiracy theory stuff mixed with a Trump supporting, you know, guy. You know, it's pretty wild.
He sounds like a brilliant entrepreneur.
He is.
I bet he made a ton of money doing exactly what he's doing right now.
Yeah, he is. I forget what he did. I had an article pulled up, but I don't feel like referencing articles at this time. I just want to have a conversation, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, super interesting stuff with that. Now I want to backpedal a bit. So you're a spiritual guy, right? You would say, you know, I mean, you have events here at the Rustic Cup that like you have like tarot readings and stuff like that, you know, those types of like, events and, you know, practices, stuff like that. They come from like a spiritual background per se. You know, one thing for me that I like to look into, not like conspiracy theory based or anything like that, but just like for my own personal sake. And I think there's so much more going on in this world. And I think you and I had a private conversation about this before. And I think there's a lot more that takes place in this world of what we think we know and what's happening and what we think that we know what's happening that a lot of people don't know. And like even like all these spiritual people or whatever else, they think they know, they don't, or they think they have like some sort of profound understanding or whatever. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think a lot about that. And I just came across a TED Talk the other night. That was by a physicist. And to be honest, I was trying to remember the title of the TED Talk. I can't remember what it was, but she was talking about dark matter and dark energy. And so as a species, humanity seems to have a grip on the ideas of atoms and protons and neutrons and quarks and neutrinos, and we think we have some idea of like how the mind works and our synapses firing and the electricity that's coursing through our body that's helping our muscles move. Like so we have that understanding. We have an understanding of like the atmosphere. We have an understanding of well, as long as you're not a flat earther, I guess we have an understanding of like the rotation of the earth and all that stuff. All of that, all of the knowledge that we have, all of the poets that have written poetically about love, all of the ideas of death and rebirth, all fit within this 4% slice, which is our best estimate of what we know about the universe. And then the rest of it, the rest of it is a combination of dark matter and dark energy. Dark matter makes up approximately another quarter of the universe, and then dark energy is the rest. And we can kind of measure dark matter but we really don't have any idea what dark energy is at this point in time. So for anybody to claim that they have the answers of anything when all of your knowledge, all of the species knowledge that you're a subset of is 4% of what we think makes up reality, is not a critical thinker. You're not doing that thing again that we talked about earlier of thinking critically, and just, I think you have to have some humility in order to think like that, to realize that, like, as an individual, me, Kris Kelley, and the knowledge that I have is a small subset of that 4%, a very minuscule subset of that 4%. So for me to claim that I know anything is kind of arrogant,
right?
Kind of arrogant and kind of short-sighted. So I kind of feel the same way about any belief system that claims to have the answer. I mean, maybe that's just the answer that you can best come up with within this small subset of information that we have at our disposal. But to me, there's so much more out there, so much more that we can't even wrap our heads around, and we may not ever be able to. Like the dark energy and the dark matter, that stuff might react or exist or whatever within a realm or a space that we just can't perceive. So we may never have all the answers, and we may never know what happens to consciousness after we die, and that's okay. It is what it is. Like, we need to just get on the best we can with what we've got.
Right, exactly. Well, I think it makes people feel good. You know what I mean? Like, when you go back to, like, religions and stuff like that, like, it's all makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you have something else after you live. You know what I mean? And you're right, though, but the critical thinking aspect of it. Not one person knows. And even a collection of people, the most brilliant people in the world, they don't know. We can speculate, and we can perform research and, do 3-decade-long studies and whatever else. We don't know. And, it is interesting. Like, we haven't even discovered everything on this planet yet alone, right? And then you get into things like dark matter, dark energy, and, quarks, quasars, and all that crazy shit, right? And I reposted this on my Instagram a couple weeks ago from this point. They had a TED Talk about it, and they discovered this new galaxy.
I saw that.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
That was the one that led me to this other TED Talk about the dark matter and dark energy. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And for those who are not familiar with it, I can pull it up real quick. Actually, I think I will. But they discovered this galaxy in a formation that has never been seen before. And it is absolutely wild. I'm going to pull it up right now. Where's it at? It's called, Birkin's Galaxy. And most of the galaxies that when we see images and pictures of online, it's like our Milky Way. It's like a big spiral. And this is not like that whatsoever. It's basically a big outer ring that would look like the normal galaxies that we see at, and then there's an inner ring too. And even things like like black holes, like, they theoretically exist. We have not found one. We haven't proven that that they exist. We think that we know they have to exist in order to keep. Like, they believe there's a supermassive black hole in the center of every galaxy. It's what keeps it in rotation. And everything is just in constant orbit and rotation of each other. And it's just a major, massive cosmic web of infinite possibilities. And in that aspect alone, it blows my mind. And that's what I mean. Like, and then you touch back onto, I'm not a very religious person. But, how can some people say that they have the answers and that this is the right way? There are thousands and thousands of religions out there that they kind of have like the same backstory in a way. Like, if you go back and watch that documentary Zeitgeist, they talk about that in the beginning and how most of the religions, they have the same origin, the same basic story, right? And, I guess the best takeaway I can think of when it comes to religion is that, and I'm not bashing, if it's your belief system, go for it. As long as you're not hurting anybody or you're not, impending on someone else's free will, then by all means, go ahead.
For sure.
But, it's just to think that they have all the answers. It's very small-minded, and I agree with you on that 100%.
Well, and I'm sorry, not to cut you off, but just to kind of, I guess, clarify my stance too on religions is that they all have the potential, well, many of them, I don't know all of them, but many of them have the potential to be a path to some form of enlightenment or or some bettering of your perspective on the world. And that's fantastic. Like, if that's what you're doing, I think they all have some truths within them. It's just a matter of, I think, still being a critical thinker and being humble as you go through your path. And like you said, just avoiding coercing anybody or stepping on anybody's toes throughout that path.
Right. All right. Absolutely agree with that. And, you know, that's like, I love like seeing like, a friend of mine sent that article to me, or that post to me about that that Birkin's Galaxy. Like, I love shit like that. Like, that's what gets me going. You know what I mean? Like, and just the infinite possibilities. Like, you know, for anyone out there who hasn't watched the series Cosmos, like it kind of breaks everything down a little bit more. So people who are not astrophysicists can kind of understand some things, but, and I love that stuff, man. And just,
I do too.
Just the amount of possibility that's really out there. You
and
know?
For me, it's the humbling part of those sorts of things. Like when you watch Cosmos and you see, all the things that we thought we knew as physicists, like, oh, you know, we are pretty sure that there's an ether out there in the world. And then like we realize, oh, that's not really the case, you know, like just to see over and over again how wrong we are, to see that like we have a framework that kind of shows the formation and creation of galaxies, but then all of a sudden we stumble upon one that does not fit in that framework. Our framework cannot produce this. How did the universe produce it if we can't figure it out, you know? But nature just kind of likes to give us the middle finger every once in a while and be like, you know what? You are not as smart as you think you are. And I love that.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, totally. And, you know, speaking of like stuff like that, you know, I had a conversation with someone. It was actually probably about maybe a year or two ago. And, for past listeners, you know that I firmly believe in life outside of this planet. But I had a conversation with someone, and you kind of see these types of things with people who are much older than I am, maybe in their 40s or 50s or something like that. They come from a previous generation of just, you know, not really researching. They just kind of just take things for what they are, right? And that's perfectly fine. But, and I was talking to him, this gentleman, he's probably in his late 40s, and, we got into conversation of aliens somehow, right? And, he's like, you really believe in those things? I'm like, yeah, of course I do. Like, you don't think so? And he goes, no. Like, this is it right here. I'm like, so you're meaning to tell me that this planet is the only contains the only living organisms in the entire universe? You know, not to sound like a dick, but that's very small-minded of you, sir. You know what I mean? Like, how can you really think that? Maybe they just haven't done enough research. Maybe they haven't done the exploration of even just the vastness of our own local solar system. And we have yet to discover any of it. You know what I mean? Barely. Yeah. We're barely scratching the surface now at this point, you know? And it's 2018. Not only just our solar system, but and that's just the tiniest speck in our Milky Way galaxy, which is 100 million light years across. You know what I mean? Right. Which contains billions and trillions of stars. Yeah. Each with their own, at least with one or two possible planets around it. You know what I mean? And that's mind blowing to me. How can you really think?
Well, in that new Birkin's Galaxy, I'm pretty sure she said it was 359 million light years away. And she said that's fairly close as far as galaxies go. Right. So we had a galaxy that was really close to us that was completely different from any other, and we just now discovered it. Like, think of how many other things there are that are completely break our molds, and we haven't discovered them yet.
Right. I don't know if you saw or not. I can pull it up for you then. But they took a new deep space picture with the Hubble Space Telescope, and I told you, I don't know if you saw that or not. But it took 14 days, I think, to gather enough light to take this image. And I'm sure you've seen the other deep space images like with the nebula and all that stuff like that. They took another one. And the largest picture you can go online and find it and download it. It's massive. It's like 130 gigs. Or I'm sorry, 130 megabytes. It's big. It's a big image. And
that's great.
Yeah, and I have it as my desktop background. But
I had some of the old ones as my phone background.
Okay, yeah. I love it, man. I love it. And just like when you think about space and time and stuff like that, you know, I've seen these images and stuff like that, and it's like, oh wow, that's just a really neat picture. But when you really like sit down and think about and grasp the concept of what you're actually looking at here, you're looking so far back in time. You know what I mean? And then in this image, each single like there's some ones that are a lot closer, some other galaxies and stuff like that. You can see them very clearly, right? But there's other ones that you just see just like a dot, and that's not a star. That's another galaxy, and there's thousands
or another
of those.
galaxy system.
Exactly,
Yeah.
another supercluster or something,
Yeah.
right? And it's just producing enough light.
Yeah.
That's just even farther away, and every single one of those dots is another galaxy somewhere very far away, and that's about the only image, because like you can pull it up, you download it, you pull it up, and then you zoom in on it, and then you can just go through and scroll down the whole page and from left and right, and you just see every single speck, and then every large picture of the bigger galaxies that show up in this image, and that like, oh, it gave me tingles, because like
Yeah.
it just made me like realize
It's
like
humbling.
holy shit,
Yeah.
yes, like we are really small,
Yeah.
and it's an incredible feeling.
Yeah, actually, that kind of reminds me. I'm going to show you right now my current phone background. I'm going to see if you recognize this. Are you familiar with this image? It's kind of dim.
No,
That is the pale blue dot. Do you see that tiny little speck right there in that beam of light?
yeah,
That's Earth.
oh,
Yeah. This
Okay.
was Carl Sagan did this very eloquent poem about or speech or whatever about the pale blue dot, but that was some satellite or something that was being sent out, and he asked NASA, can you just turn around real quick and take a picture in Earth's direction?
Mm-hmm.
And he just writes about how everybody we've ever known, every dictator who has spilled rivers of blood over their small fraction of that dot,
yeah.
is just right there.
It's right there,
that's
yeah.
it. Everything.
That's great. Well, did it say where in space that picture was taken from?
Oh, probably, but I don't know off the top of my
Okay.
head. Yeah.
Okay, I've seen that before, like, and I see a lot of this going on right now with the Cassini, the space probe, the one that was orbiting Saturn and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And there's this new image that's circulating all over Facebook. It's like, oh, the last images of Cassini before it crashed into the Saturn. So if those of you don't know, they crashed into Saturn, so they didn't want it to crash into a moon in case there's life, and they had bacteria on it, whatever else, blah 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 blah. So they crashed this probe after it was done its mission. They crashed it into Saturn on purpose. And they're supposedly these last images it took, like as it was approaching into Saturn's atmosphere. I'm like, no, people, you're wrong, because all these images they took, they're all black and white, and they're all really crappy quality. This is an artist rendition of what it could look like.
Yeah.
Like, so this goes back to the whole thinking critically and going back. So my wife Nikki, she shared it to me. She's like, "Oh wow, look at this! This
Yeah, I
is
was
so
going to
cool."
say I saw that.
Yeah, and I commented, "Yeah, this would be great." However, you click on the link, it takes you to another link, and it says this is an artist rendition. I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, sorry, babe, you ain't got one on me this time."
Yeah.
But even still, like that possibility is really cool.
Heck yeah.
And even like a lot of those pictures that you see, you go to Google and just type in universe. A lot of those pictures that you see, they're all artist renditions and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And if you actually look at what they really are when they have these big powerful telescopes and radio telescopes and what they see in deep space and stuff like that, they don't see pictures and stuff like that. They see numbers and graphs and stuff like that. Everything they put together is all based on numbers, and they're somehow through science able to figure out what color that is and whatever else. It's pretty wild.
Well, and I don't even know if they necessarily figure out what color that is. I've seen some different editions of like the Hubble images where like they'll say, okay, this one's colored for all the radio
Like a
spectrum,
certain type
and this
of,
one's
like,
for the
element,
ultraviolet
yeah.
spectrum or
Right,
something.
right.
So like they just kind of pick a color. They're like, okay, we'll pick green to represent this, or we'll pick red to represent these gases. But like that's not what it looks like. It's invisible to us. It's
Right.
invisible to our color spectrum, our visible spectrum.
Mm-hmm. And to continue on a little bit more about the whole space thing is that like when you see like the images of like deep space and stuff like that, even like stars that we see at night here on Earth, like those stars and this like things that we see, they could not exist. They might not even exist anymore. And I think that's a very mind blowing thing to think about. And like just do yourselves a favor in an experiment. Go out one night, and not many people do it anymore on their own will, unless they're going to a club or something. But go out and just look up one night, and a lot of those stars, they might not exist anymore. It's taken that long for the light to get here. And that light might still be coming to Earth for the next million years until it finally is just not there anymore. That's a pretty crazy concept to me.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, space, time, all that stuff like that is amazing. And, I love the movie Interstellar. I don't know if you've seen that or not. Matthew McConaughey.
I don't think I did.
Oh, that's a must watch for sure. Like
I heard it was good.
that'll scratch that itch really, really well. As far as like space time and like inner like galactical and then like dimensions. It covers all of that. It's like 2 hours long. It's a fucking great movie. Absolutely love it.
I've
Matthew
heard
McConaughey
that.
does so well. Yeah, really good movie. I know Neil deGrasse Tyson, he talks about that. He references that a lot. He's like, that's actually pretty accurate, some of the stuff, the whole cause a black hole just appears out of nowhere. Oh, not a black hole, wormhole appears out of somewhere near Saturn. And it's this just came out of nowhere, but who put it here? So on and so forth. I won't spoil much for you, but yeah, great movie. Really good movie. But shit, man, this was fun.
Oh, yeah, it always is.
Always is, man. Before we get going here, man, is there anything else you want to wrap up with? Anything you want to throw out there for the people?
No, just check us out on Facebook, Rustic Cup. See what we got going on every month. We've got some cool stuff. I've been on the back burner. I've been kicking around the idea of having a critical thinking sort of meetup going on a monthly basis.
Like a think tank.
Yeah,
I
just something where we just meet up and kind of do this for a couple hours. I think that'd be cool.
I'll bring the microphones out. We just get it in digital format.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, for anyone who is in Pennsylvania, if you're in Maryland, if you're in Ohio, I don't care where you're from. Check out the Rustic Cup, guys. It's located in a tiny little town called East Prospect, Pennsylvania. Just Google search Rustic Cup, East Prospect, Pennsylvania, and you'll find it. It's a great little coffee shop. The vibes here are real, and it's just such a down-to-earth place. Super relaxing, and the coffee is absolutely amazing. If you're a coffee person, he's got something here for you. He's got something to scratch that coffee itch that you're looking for. So yeah. Yeah, Facebook. I'm sorry, Rustic Cup on Facebook. Mm-hmm. Anywhere else?
We also have an Instagram presence and a Twitter that I don't do anything with.
Twitter's a battleground, man.
It is.
It's a battleground.
It is. I'm kind of done with it. Yeah. Instagram and Facebook is about it for right now.
Okay. And where are you at on Instagram?
Rustic_cup.
Okay. So there you go, guys. So I'll link everything into the show notes in the description for you guys to follow along with. He does the latte art, stuff like that. It's super cool. He puts that on Instagram and Facebook, so check that out. It's super neat. So if you're not from around this area, or if you're out west or something like that, you can still check out his cool latte art videos. Super neat. Well, man, Kris, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you sitting down with me for episode 50, man, and having this. Yeah.
When are we going to do it again?
Whenever, man. You let me know. I'm down anytime.
Next week.
Okay. Well, shit. I don't care, man. We'll figure something out. But yeah, a lot of fun, man. I always enjoyed coming out here and recording with you. I will say this though, as from your perspective, from episode 8. Now we were very new, and I was even though I've known you for a while, still nervous. You were my first interview for the podcast. First person I ever interviewed. That has to feel special, right?
It does. It really
makes
does.
me feel good to say that.
Yeah.
For you to say that. For the ego. But in comparison to how it was back then to how I am now, how would you rate that?
I would say
no pressure.
Oh, I don't feel any. I'll be candid. I would say I like this setup. I mean, I think you just had one mic last time, and that was kind of awkward because there were 3 of us trying to chit chat over that one mic. That was kind of weird. This is so much more comfortable. I think you were a heck of a lot more comfortable. I think it flowed a lot better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're doing good things.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. And we are doing good things. We're growing. This podcast is growing, man. And, I hope this episode does just as well as the episode 8 did, even though I feel how horrible that was, how I did at least. You were great. I did horrible.
I didn't think so.
It was still fun though, regardless. And, coffee's always good though. God, appreciate the coffee.
Good.
But yeah. So, guys, check out Kris Kelley and the Rustic Cup on social media. Follow, if you're in the local area, pop in, say hi, tell them, Blake from the Noise Pollution Podcast sent you. Tell them to put a coffee on my tab and I'll pay for it later. But just one coffee, that's it. So Kris, you heard that. It's on recording. So if they go, I need 50 coffees. No, you can't do that. You get one.
I got you.
Kris will put it on my tab and I'll take care of it. So, yeah, guys, thank you so much for being here. Episode 50. I appreciate all the continued support as always. I appreciate all of you for coming back. And if you're new around here, I appreciate you so much for taking the time to sit down with us and have a conversation with us. You're a fly on the wall here. And real quick before I end, I will say we do have social media, so if you want to follow up with me on social media, you can check us out on Facebook at Noise Pollution Podcast. There's a like page and a group page, so make sure to like the page and join the group. Also on Instagram at Noise Pollution Podcast. I do a lot of stuff on there. That's my preferred platform of choice for social media. It's just a little bit more creative. And I'm also on Twitter, that whole battleground we were just talking about, at Pollution Radio. And you can also send me an email day or night. The line is always open 24/7 for whatever need or any question you have for me. Send an email, and that is at noisepollutiontalks@gmail.com. And if you're new around here, go ahead and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast, now on YouTube. So if YouTube is a preference, go to YouTube, search the Noise Pollution Podcast, subscribe. Everything will be on there. So, guys, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Kris, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
All right, guys. We'll see you in the next one.